Okay, we're live. Good July afternoon, Huntersville. This is the called order of the HOAB meeting, Huntersville Ordinances Advisory Board for July 11th, 3:30. It looks like all of us are in attendance at the moment. Do we have any comments about the minutes, any motions?
I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes as written.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a second? Thank you. 2 seconds.
Sorry, I didn't get to push the button.
All right. All in favor of approving the minutes from May? Raise your hand. Any opposed? Abstain? I was not here. Oh, that's right. Okay. Got it. Got it. Okay. We have one action agenda item today. It's TA 2412, proposed text amendment to modify or remove uses requiring a special use permit affecting Articles 3 and 9 of the Huntersville zoning ordinance.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. This is TA 24-12 SUP ordinance modification. Before I get into the proposals the proposal of this text amendment, I just want to quickly run through what a special use permit is, so we kind of know. I'm going to go pretty high level, not get into the details of what the process looks like, but the purpose of a special use permit is to establish standards for uses that could be compatible with a zoning district's purpose but may have significant impacts on the surrounding area. So traditionally, they might be something that is environmentally sensitive. I think maybe something that could cause any sort of nuisance. We also do have certain unique projects that fit within that special use permit process. Maybe something that isn't, like I said, kind of unique. I think we have a three-par golf course that requires a special use permit in a zoning district. So that's pretty high level what a special use permit is, but it's something that entails that public process or quasi-judicial process. So quick background on this text amendment. Staff and previous town boards have worked to reduce the number of those quasi-judicial applications. Best example is subdivisions. Previously, subdivisions went through that quasi-judicial process. They are now reviewed and approved administratively, which means planning staff and engineering staff will look at a proposal submitted, match it up with the zoning, subdivision, land development ordinance for compliance, and it will get approved that way instead of going through the public process. Special use permits, part of that reason is they can be somewhat complicated and obviously increase review time by having to go through that process. So staff is looking to just continue that effort by proposing to modify certain uses that require approval of special use permits and ultimately limit interaction between elected officials and the public. So now onto the proposal. Planning staff is proposing to modify certain uses requiring special use permits to instead undergo a conditional district rezoning, be reviewed administratively with the listed conditions in the zoning ordinance, or be removed from the ordinance. The goal is to shift uses that are not environmentally sensitive away from the more rigorous special use permit process. I won't be able to go into every single use that is being addressed in this presentation. That can come after through the question and answer process, but looking to move some of those uses that are not environmentally sensitive away. So things like, say, a landfill would still go through that special use permit process. The results of this, again, it'll cut down on the review process and the complicated special use permit process while still ensuring suitable conditions are applied. It builds on the previously approved text amendment that modifies conditional district rezonings. That allows us to increase the standards for developments through that rezoning. Previously, we were allowed to meet the minimums of the ordinance. This allows us to go above and beyond, try to get some public good out of those rezonings. So our proposals are more focused on changing the review process of certain uses rather than changing the conditions to those uses. So the uses are the conditions, excuse me, are largely going to stay the same, but how something gets approved and the process for review will change. Like I mentioned, there's a decent amount of uses being moved around within this ordinance proposal. So I decided to pick one as an example and kind of go through what it will look like. This is a clip of the uses permitted with conditions and the uses permitted with a special use permit within Article 3, Section 3.21 of the Huntersville zoning ordinance. This is our rural zoning district. So here, everything is listed, uses permitted with conditions and the uses permitted with the special use permit. One of the proposals we're doing is to take a commercial communication tower, which is currently under uses permitted with a special use permit, and then move it to uses permitted with conditions. It's important to note, like I said, the conditions of that use are not changing. It's just that process it goes through. So with this proposed change, it would not have to go through the special use permit process, but it would still have to comply with all of the conditions. Now I have this horrible list of texts. This is the conditions for a commercial communication tower. Like I mentioned, there are a couple of grammatical changes in removing that it is subject to a special use permit. I just added this to the point, these conditions are not being changed. It's just the process that it goes through. Now, one thing to mention, if someone wants to not comply with one of these conditions or they want a modification from one of these conditions, they would then have to go through that conditional rezoning process, which would then essentially trigger the public meeting process if they wanted a modification from one of these conditions. So I think now I will open it up to any questions. Yeah, sorry about that.
So we thought this was probably the best approach to do this as opposed to going through line by line. But another example, and this Patrick pulled out, was the commercial communication towers. Another one. We currently have a case, but I'd like to talk about a case that's very similar to last year, the hotel that was on North Cross Drive. You had a special use permit as well as a conditional rezoning. You run into conflicts where, how do I talk about the rezoning without talking about the special use permit? What we're trying to do is eliminate that conflict by having this text amendment in place. And again, if anybody doesn't want to comply with the conditions that are there, obviously you always have the right to come back and ask for a conditional rezoning, which then introduces the public process. So we think this is a very good compromise and a way to get these things cleared up. We know there were some challenges with folks with the SUP process as well as the quasi process. So we're just, again, the previous couple boards wanted to minimize those quasi interactions, and this is just one of those things that we can do. Thanks again to the legal staff for helping us pull this one together. As you see, it's quite in depth with the non-brevity of the length of that thing, all 160 pages. So, and kudos to Patrick and his team for helping getting this thing cleared up.
My question really is just a general question more than just specific to this. Are we minimizing the opportunities for the public to have input by doing this? I know it's a longer process.
I would say
but
no, because
okay, so let's take the hotel.
sure.
I don't know anything about that hotel. No, we're not talking about the 12-story deal, right? We're talking about a different hotel, or are we talking
We're
about,
talking about the one that was next to La Unica last year,
okay,
Jason's birthday.
yeah, okay. So, under this new process, there would be no public hearings as long as they didn't want,
No, they would still need to go through the rezoning process, but there would not be a special use
okay.
permit
Okay,
process.
so they would still have
The
an
rub last year was they had to do a special use permit and a rezoning. The board members were limited to what they could speak to the public with on the rezoning because there was such an overlap with the special use permit. We're removing that overlap from now.
Okay.
Okay, so now I can talk to them all I want about the rezoning for this hotel.
Somewhere in your statement, you said something about it would remove the requirement to have some public hearings.
For the special use permit, okay, which is a quasi judicial process.
Yes. But if they meet the requirements and it's a controversial project for whatever reason, seems like all of them are controversial for some reason,
Seems to be the case.
then in that case, it would not have to go to any kind of public hearing.
So we have kept the conditions for some of these things, for the hotel spacing and those types of things in place. If a applicant wanted to modify those standards, which happens quite often, then they would need to come through the rezoning process, therefore introducing a public process.
Okay, can we go back to the previous slide?
Sure. So if you see Art 9.9, there's that whole list of conditions, which are the next slide. We're keeping all of those conditions. If I am a cell tower builder and I don't want to meet one of those conditions, I now have to go through the rezoning process to get a modification for that.
Okay, and agricultural industry. And I don't know what the exact definition of that, I didn't look it
A lot
up,
of
but,
different
yeah,
things.
yeah.
Yeah.
But that will be permitted with a special use permit. It's now permitted with a special use permit.
And it still will be.
Right. So we kept
So
all of
that
the-
will have to
so
go
I want
to,
Correct.
All right,
Yeah.
I want to have a crematorium, still going to have to go through that special use permit.
Yep.
I want to do different things, large industrial buildings that require special use permits, keeping that in there. We tried to take the non-environmentally sensitive uses out of that category and kept them in with the uses with conditions, with the caveat, if I need modification to those, got to go through the conditional rezoning process.
okay.
And then in all clarity and transparency, there are a couple uses in there that we have never used. What was the one?
Commercial park, 3 golf course.
Yeah, par 3 golf course. We've taken some of these things out that we haven't seen that have been in the ordinance for 30-plus years, or someone asked for a text amendment for special use, never came to fruition, so we did a little cleanup in there as well.
Okay, as long as we're not eliminating the public's opportunity to,
I think we're enhancing it because it doesn't hamstring the ability for citizens to communicate with the board.
I was just going to also note along with that, the public input on a quasi-judicial matter, which a special use permit, is already limited by a lot. You have to prove stand-in, so you can't just come up and speak like you would on any other matter. You'd have to speak during the public comment period if you wanted to speak on a special use permit, and that information isn't even allowed to be included because it has to be part of the hearing to be included as evidentiary or to be included as part of the special use quasi-judicial process. So quasi-judicial already limits it a lot, so moving this, like Brian said, isn't limiting the public input in that way. Scott?
Brian, I do have a couple questions. Actually, first one is going back to what you were talking about, any particular uses that will be removed, and the one I saw was country inn development, I think, and par 3. And not that I'm opposed to anything being removed, but it may be helpful for the board and everybody else just to see what those are, because
Sure.
some people may have an issue with, again, I don't necessarily, it's never happened, but
A Country Inn was a text amendment, I want to say 15-plus years ago, by John Choate for his daughter. They were going to build a specialty facility over off of McCord Road, if I'm not mistaken. Economy went in the dump. They chose never to do it. It's been in the books for 20 years. It's very limited in scope as to what could be built. We've talked to a couple folks, they're like, economically, this does not make sense. So we're like, we're in here, we've got the hood open, let's go ahead and take a couple of these ones out.
And those are the only two that, as I went through it, that I saw. Again, it might just be helpful that you could clear it up if anybody has a question is, yes, we have removed some uses. These are the three we've removed, and this is why.
It was the par 3 golf course at the Country Inn, and I forget what the other one was off the top of my
It's
head.
only two I noticed.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, there was an offsite, all right. Again, that was a specialty text amendment written by an applicant. It's no longer happening, so.
Number two, and maybe page 32, highway commercial, and you touched on it, the hotel spacing. Can you just kind of walk through
Yeah,
what?
nothing is changing from the uses, with the conditions are not changing on that. We're not changing, we're not saying going from 250 feet to 200 feet. All the conditions are the same. If an applicant were to meet all of those conditions, staff would be able to issue that permit as opposed to having to come in and get a special use permit. What we've seen is when you have these hotels that are closer to residents, i.e. the Burkdale situation, they need some sort of modification anyways. If it's a site that's not close, that meets all the conditions, they're further away from the subdivisions anyways.
Okay.
So, again, it's just cleaning things up and making the process a lot smoother.
Two other ones. One, having to be page 53, where it talks about financial institutions, and you basically define up to 6,000 square feet. And just, I'm always cautious about defining something that's,
Right.
and we're in the middle of a deal right now where there's happens to be a financial institution that is 6,300 square feet existing, and the conditional rezoning only allowed 6,000. And we're talking about 300 square feet. In other words, I'd rather see us err on the bigger side of things. That's just commentary, and I don't have a special number. Is it?
Yeah, these were listed with some of the conditions in the TOD ordinance. So we were just looking to remove some of those to give some more flexibility. Like you said, if you could literally be down there, you can't exceed the 6,000 square feet. But if you had that 6,300, that would be a challenge. Again, if you needed to get that extra sizing, we could always go with a conditional rezoning. But some of these things were very limiting, and they're 30 years old. And at some point in time, we're going to be looking to rewrite the TOD orders depending on what happens with the red line.
Yeah.
So a lot of these things are going to be changing anyways. Again, this was just some cleanup work.
And I didn't know if this was an opportune time to, increase that from 6 to 10 or something. And same deal, there's a daycare center limitation of
Right.
8,000 square feet. I don't know what a traditional daycare center is today. It probably is maybe greater than 8,000.
They are, and that's why we looked at take out some of those.
Yeah, that would be my suggestion. As you're cleaning all this up, is there a way we can maybe avoid
Yeah,
what
we've
you're trying to
taken,
avoid?
yeah, we've taken a lot of those limitations off. Again, this, we don't have any TOD zoning sitting out there, so someone would have to come in with a conditional rezoning anyways. So we'll flex to the market a little bit.
Thank you.
Kathy, you look like you have a question.
Oh, no, I'm listening.
Sure.
Anybody else? Are there, I know that, I know that there are, we're trying to move it to conditional rezoning, and that brings the opportunity for the public to have more input with commissioners at many different opportunities. Are there any times where these things are going to be monitored by staff instead, or do they automatically trigger a conditional rezoning?
Only if they'd want a modification from those conditions.
Okay.
And you typically will see these with, the one that's going to come up probably most often is going to be those hotel situations.
Okay.
I'm not going to speak of the current situation, but in the past, very similar situation along North Cross Drive. Like I said, you run into that conflict. What can I talk to the citizens about? What can't? It's very, very confusing for both the commissioners and the citizens. Why can't they answer? Citizens say, why can't they answer my question?
Mm-hmm.
We have to cover that during the SUP process, and it's frustrating for both sides. We're just trying to eliminate that frustration.
Okay. And just for this one example, the commercial communication towers, how is that not environmental? I mean, how did you come up with what was not environmental, maybe?
We struggled with an example to pick. We just picked this one, and we knew we were going to get asked this question. Again, this is a rural area. There's large setbacks for these things, so there. If you want to go to the next page, very restrictive as to where you go. You had a minimum acres for the 8.5 acres for the parcels. That automatically takes out a whole bunch of parcels. You had to have certain setbacks. You had to be certain distances from residents. Again, if you meet all of these things, first of all, there's probably only going to be a handful of parcels that this could occur on. Two, if you were to meet all of these conditions, then we felt it would, again, would be just so few parcels that could do that on their own, that we didn't do a full analysis because you can't, it would take too long. But if you needed a modification from one of these, you'd be in the rezoning process, and then all the neighbors would be involved. Again, we had to pick one, and this is the one we chose, and we knew there'd be some questions on that one. But
Okay.
everybody needs cell phone receptions now.
In that vein, who watches to make sure what the plans say are what's being actually followed, like after it's been approved and it's going?
Sure.
Mine's on, I'm sorry.
There you
I
go.
was leaning
Sorry,
back.
I'll speak up. Yeah, that's fine. Staff and zoning
Staff,
enforcement.
but for example, if the staff member who was originally assigned to a project gets promoted, then what happens to oversight of the projects that that person was overseeing? Like,
Are you speaking like once a project is completed?
no, while they're in the middle of, like, tree saves and setbacks and,
Oh, sure. Yeah, we have a number of checklists and those types of things that the plan reviewers have to go through. If Patrick were to be out for an illness for a couple of weeks, I could literally step in, pick up where he was at, continue that review process using the checklists and making sure all the conditions were met.
okay, thanks.
Sure.
Kathy?
Following up on that, how then are we seeing, and this is on social media, people who live where these projects have started and buffers being removed and things, how is that kind of thing happening if someone is indeed monitoring
Sure.
the projects?
We have our zoning inspectors and our erosion control inspectors, and they visit the sites at least monthly, if not weekly, depending on what's going on. Citizen complaints do come in. We immediately do our best to get someone out in the field. I know a particular case recently, I was working from home, got in my car, drove out there, made sure everything was still, in accordance. It was that they had not cleared something that they were accused of. We always follow up with the developers team, so they are aware of the citizen interaction, why we're out there, why we're visiting, just to know that we're keeping eyes on them. We don't have bodies to sit on every single site all day long. Unfortunately, things do happen, and we have to go out, and sometimes we have to get into mitigation situations as well. So we have options of fining. We work with the developers to restore, try to make sure that our residents are protected the best that we can, and if we do get into a mitigation situation, that they're satisfied with the type of mitigation.
Motion to approve as written. Do you want me to read it? I motion to approve action agenda item 4A, TA 24-12, proposed text amendment to modify or remove uses requiring a special use permit affecting Articles 3 and 9 of the Huntersville zoning ordinance.
A second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any discussion? I know we've done a little bit of discussion, but technically, any discussion?
They were good questions. They were good. I read through it too. And like I say, I was confused, but it was a lot. Those were good questions, and I thought staff did a good job trying to summarize it and get it down. So I thought that was good.
Okay. Anybody else? I think anytime we can allow the public to be engaged and feel heard is important. Quasi-judicial anything is a challenge at any level. At the same time, I'd like for public input to matter, so that's why I think it's important for public to feel heard and be able to say what's going on, not just, hey, let's go count trees and see, what they're doing and are they paying attention to this, or, the administrative decisions kind of stuff that kind of make some public people frustrated. That I do appreciate giving the public more opportunity, even if it is more of a headache for you. So the rezoning option is the legislative decision that's good for the public. So I appreciate all that hard work on that. Okay, we're ready to vote. Motion to pass. If you're in favor of passing 2412, raise your hand, please. Any opposed? Okay, unanimous. Yes? Okay.
Thank you.
We are at other business. It feels like we did this 5 years ago, but it was really only about a year and a half ago. Consider appointment of chair and vice chair from 5A. So do we have any nominations for vice chair? Tracy is telling me we start with vice chair. I'm glad she did, because I didn't know that. Yes, sir. Okay, we have a nomination for Kathy Jones. We got any other nominations, or? They're all shaking their head. Okay. Do we have a second for the nomination of Kathy? We have a second from Scott Harrington. I'm not leaning up. All right, so look, we need to vote on Kathy Jones being vice chair of the HOAB. All in favor of Kathy as vice chair? You not voting? Okay. Unanimous. Okay. All right. And at this quick hour, we need a chair. So a nomination for a chair. Yes, Scott.
I will nominate Amy Holman
Okay.
for chair. I think she's done a good job, and keep it up.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll second.
All right, we have a nomination, a motion, and a second. Do we have any other nominations for chair? We do not. So can we vote, please? If you vote for Amy Holman for chair of HOAB, please raise your hand. That is a unanimous vote. Thank you very much. It does take a while to get used to how to run this thing. And sometimes I lose my words, but for the most part, I have learned how to do that and ask questions that are relevant to stuff at the same time. So it took me a little while. I appreciate it. And hopefully I can continue to do both. Now, apparently, I just need to learn how to lean up. We need a motion to adjourn at this point, or Scott?
Other business, oh, go ahead.
I'd like to say one thing first. I
Yes, sir.
want to thank both of you for being willing to serve again in those positions.
Well, thank you.
It's extra work, and you do it, and you seem to enjoy it, and so that way I didn't cringe when I nominated Amy again, because I think she wanted to do it, and I'm happy with both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I echo Scott's comments. Thank you guys for serving and leading us. My other new business, since we have Mr. Trott and Brian here, Exit 23, it's unrelated to this. When will be open Exit 23? I don't think it's Mr. Trott's project, but he's probably closer to it than anybody.
That's what he gets for coming in.
When I saw him walk through the door.
Sure. So the DOT's project at Gilead and I-77, their initial project completion date, I believe, is next spring. So, and I have not heard of any change in that date so far. No official date's been published.
That's quite a ways away. Okay.
I move we adjourn.
All right, a movement to adjourn. Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, we have a second. All in favor of adjourning? Good afternoon. Thank you very much.